Adding working signals to your model railway really is a great asset. But how difficult is it to achieve? Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and today we're looking at the signals that need to be installed on this particular board, and it runs from the branch line station down to the start of the viaduct board. And on this board we need to install 5 signals. So let me take you through them one at a time, and then hopefully you can follow my thought process as to why I'm doing it this way. Now here's the edge of the viaduct board. And obviously there's a couple of points here with a diamond crossing, and these things need to be protected. So here's the upline coming from the helix, and clearly we need a signal here marked by the little day glow dot to protect this junction from an incoming train. So here we need a 3-aspect signal. Now exactly the same is said for this section here. So we bring a train down from the branch line station, we need to hold it here with a 3-aspect signal, again to protect this junction should there be a train coming up from the helix. So those are the 2 outgoing signals at this end. Incoming trains, of course, need to be controlled as well. And in this position here, I've bought from Absolute Aspects a signal with a theatre box, and it indicates platform 1, platform 2 or goods, and it will go in here to protect, to protect this junction. Lovely. Now moving up the board a little further, we need a signal here to protect the tunnel, which will actually be the entrance to the helix. So obviously we need to protect the tunnel itself. Also we need a shunt signal going in here which will protect this junction here from goods traffic. And then finally we need a signal here to control platforms 1 and 2 running from the branch line station out into the main layout. Now I approached Absolute Aspects about building me a signal. Now the particular design I asked them to produce was that based upon a signal in Weymouth Station. And it's 2 3-aspect signals with position lights. However, in my case with the branch line station, the position lights aren't required. Now it really is a decent piece of engineering, and as you can see it's got the ID plates fitted as well with CMR 124 and 126. Now I've just wired up just 2 of the lights there to turn those on, and you can see a yellow and a red, and it really is a decent acquisition. I'll turn it around so you can see the rear with the ladders. Yeah, it's just plain down to earth, lovely really. Anyway, let's pop it in the branch line station so you can see where it ought to go. And here is its intended position, not dissimilar to Weymouth, at the end of platforms 1 and 2. Obviously it will be sunk into the platforms so the base becomes level. So there is some wiring to be carried out prior to the assembly of the final positions of these boards. And looking along the centre of the screen we can see the board joints, and the signal actually sits to the left of the board joints, so it needs to be installed on the edge of the platform prior to the installation of the main branch line station. Now having removed all the major items from the branch line station to maintain the helix, do a little bit of work on there, was the ideal time to fit this signal. So let me show you what I've done. Now as you've seen, the signal comes on a little board. So if I disconnect the signal itself, and what I've done is I've made a cutaway here and dropped all the feeder cables for platform 1 and platform 2 and mark them out accordingly, and I can drop this down here, screw this little plate into the baseboard, fit an opening from the platform above it, and then if I just fiddle this a moment before I screw it down, I end up with this sort of arrangement. There will be a little bit of tidying up to do around it, but hopefully you'll agree that it's a ideal way of installing this signal. So here is that little cable all made up, and it is worth just mentioning about colour coding. Now it might seem obvious, but the colour coding, but I've used red for the red, yellow for yellow, green for green, and on the common I've just used a brown cable. And these things from Absolute Aspects are clearly marked out which cables go where, and there's also an instruction sheet. So a pretty nifty arrangement. Right. I must confess this did take a little bit of time to chisel the timber out, but well worth the effort in the end. Beautiful. So now we have these signals in and potentially wired up. How are we going to change them? Well, you could use simple 3-position switches on a small control panel. So you can select, go from your red to your green and send your trains off with your handset. And this area here it's always going to be operated by one particular operator, but in conjunction with other people around the layout. Now, do I really want him to be concerned about changing the signals, or would I want the trains, as it were, to command the signals and to do it all for him? Well, I think that would be ideal. So I'm not going to build a conventional little control panel, so with the little switches to do all the work and LEDs perhaps, but rather that than a dedicated system to control the signals for me. And the item I'm going to use is something called a Sig M20 from sig-natrak. So here we have our little device, the Sig M20 from sig-natrak. And if we take a closer look, you can see where I've applied 12 volts DC. There's a LocoAnalyse in and out cable, and then the cables coming in from the signals. And platform 1 with its red, yellow and green, platform 2 similarly with its red, yellow and green. And as this is a common cathode signal, that's a common negative, then my common cable comes into terminal 5. If it were a common anode, that's a common positive, then my cable would come in on terminal 4, which is pretty nifty really, because obviously you can use the board for either configuration. Now there is a piece of software that goes with this called LocoAnalyse, so I need to open it up, give it all the information it requires, such as the serial number and all this sort of blah, and hopefully in a few hours I'll get back to you. Well, when I said I'll see you in a couple of hours, the complete lie. It's now 24 hours later. In fact, I was in the room at 5:30 this morning, still scratching my head over the sort of logic of it all. Anyway, what I've got here on my main sort of train controller screen is a program which I'll show you in a second called LocoAnalyse, and I've got train controller running on the little laptop. It's been a challenge, let's say, but thanks to somebody who reached out to me, a gentleman by the name of Charles, let's call him Charles R, I'm sure you know who you are. We've spent several hours this morning FaceTiming and trying to sort out why my Sig M20 and blah wouldn't work, and it's mainly due to my incompetence. So let's have a little look inside and I'll show you what went wrong. So from the desktop then, I'm opening up the program LocoAnalyse, and if I drag it out so we I can actually see the thing, and straightforward stuff. I'm not going to go through all this detail. File, connect, gives you some options. So I'm using a loco buffer, all straightforward, but the actual work is done in the configuring the boards. Sig M20 is what we're talking about. Double click this and it takes you in. Now I've got 3 signals now installed. So if we take a look at one of them, this is platform 1 of the branch station, and I want the signal to be read when point 4 is closed, point 7 is thrown, point 8 is thrown, point 1 is closed, and various trains, locos or whatever are in various sensors. All kind of straightforward. And there's also a piece here where I've installed a little shunt signal, a 2-aspect common cathode, all straightforward. And again, when point 3 is thrown, I want it to be read. Of course, when point 3 is thrown, it's not read because it's a ground signal, and you can see it as I change it here. And then when you make the changes, this isn't obvious. You just OK the winners when you come in, but you have to press program, because otherwise it doesn't write all this information to the board. And it's only when you're using, once it's programmed, that it has a memory. Now, starting the system up from scratch, you don't need LocoAnalyse running in the background if you're using Train Controller, because Train Controller talks to the Sig M20 and it knows what to do. But furthermore, in Train Controller, you don't need to add signals at the end of all the blocks, which is sort of kind of eye candy as far as the track plan's concerned. None of that exists. It's just a case that Train Controller looks at the Sig M20, and the Sig M20 then changes the signals with the rules that you've written, that, you know, block 20 must be occupied, block 21 must be free, and points A, B and C must be in positions, thrown, closed, or whatever. So it's all kind of straightforward really. So let's have a little look and I'll show you what I mean. Now, as you can see, we've got a class 25 on platform 1B and a parcels on platform 2B. Easy. And the points are set against them. However, if I now change the points to allow the class 25 to come out, you'll see that it goes to green. However, if I change another point to allow the parcels to come out, platform 2 goes green and platform 1 goes red. And just to add a little bit more complication, if I was to put a locomotive on this block here, which would bar access for both of those, you'll see that they are both red. And so there's an interlock there to stop a train coming down and colliding with another that might be waiting at the junction. Of course, when I say an interlock, there's an interlock in Train Controller, but if there's a guy running the branch line station, the interlock doesn't exist, because you can just drive your trains manually. So therefore, that train can come down if the points are set with it and collide with our little shunter. Of course, it's an SPAD, signal passed at danger. So there's clearly a breach of regulations, and we'll thrash him to death. Right, so that's that. Hopefully makes some kind of sense. Now, I was looking at this little shunt signal earlier, and this, because this is a head shunt signal, it's white and yellow when it's in the head shunt position, but it does appear to be white and red. Rest assured, this is white and yellow. And then obviously when the head shunt is closed and access is allowed to the main lines, you get the 2 whites. Right, now I mentioned I got into a pickle earlier. Well, this is what happened. So as you can see, here are the 2 signals from the branch line station coming in, both on red, yellow, green. Then there's a gap, another red, yellow, green, and then in terminal 5 goes the common cable. However, during the testing and trying to get it to figure out how it actually worked, we realised we were in a bit of a pickle, because both the lights on the station were on green. Now clearly that can't be right, because you can't have both trains charging off at the same time. And then eventually the penny dropped that actually these were wired the wrong way around. They shouldn't have been red, yellow, green. They should have been green, yellow, red. And once I rewired and put them out the right way, our problems went away. But I tell you what, it took some figuring out. The logic just wasn't there. And reading the manual, it wasn't obvious either. Now, talking a little more about the Sig M20, there's some instructions you can download, and naturally I print them off because I'm a bit thick, and then I can cover it in highlight pen and post-it notes. But one great asset I've used on this little job is over there, because once I'd installed these signal heads, I could no longer see them. So all I needed really was a little vanity mirror to help me out. So having cut my teeth, as it were, on platforms 1 and 2 of the branch line station, and of course the little shunt signal, it's time for another. And that's the one here, which is the branch line exit. It's another 3-aspect signal, but this time it controls all traffic exiting from the branch line areas. Now, via the Sig M20, our signals are all linked. And if I change a point for platform 2, you'll see that it goes from red to yellow to allow access for the parcels wagon to go down the line. But of course it would only go as far as that red signal. However, if I change the points just approaching the viaduct, so now we have access right across the viaduct and over into the Chadwick station, and obviously you can see that the parcels train is now clear with a green and right through the next signal with a green. Beautiful. If I were to change the points, then clearly you can see that the parcels train now cannot proceed, but the class 25 can. If of course I change the signal at the points approaching the viaduct again, the bottom light will go red and the signal for the class 25 on platform 1 will go back to yellow. Hopefully that makes sense. So the next little task for me to undertake is that signal with the theatre box. The theatre box will read 1 for platform 1, 2 or G for goods. There's a yellow and a red because there is no green because we're at the end of the station after this signal. And there's a position light. And now as you can see here, it comes with 2 mounting boards. There's this board here that screws underneath your baseboard, and then this one you can fit some distance from it to allow better access and easier access then to connect up your cables. Now as you can see, by just plugging this straight in, I've clearly got a great deal of programming to do because I have the theatre box illuminated and the yellow and the red and the position light. And if a train were going to the goods area, it certainly wouldn't have the yellow, it would have the red and the position light. So there's lots of configurations now to be programmed into the Sig M20 to allow this to function properly. Another instance would be a train that's coming into platform 1, let's say, and there might be a bubble car already on the platform, which means then you'd need a 1 and a red and a position light because you're going to send a train into an already occupied platform. So to get the signalling right is essential really. You either do it properly or you needn't bother at all. I'm no perfectionist, but I'll certainly give it a good go. Now this video was not going to be a decent review of the Sig M20, it's just something that I bought and I thought I'd have a look at it and install it, and to be perfectly honest it works perfectly well, and each Sig M20, when I think about this, can control up to 10 signals, normally 8 3-aspect signals or 6 4-aspect signals, or perhaps just only a couple of signals if they're those kind of beasts. But it is a LocoNet data flow system, so you need a LocoNet in and out, so a LocoNet based system such as DigiTrax or whatever for it to be used properly. Right, there we go. My sincere thanks go to Charles Russell. Charles, you're a star, mate. Thank you so much for your time and your wife's patience as well, because it was a blast and we got this sorted up to a certain extent. When I start on this signal a bit later, you might get another phone call, or of course when this video comes out you'll already had that call, wouldn't you? But there we go. And I hope you've enjoyed it. A little bit geeky, but if you're into automation, some of the stuff from sig-natrak might well be worth a little look at. Where can you buy a Sig M20 from? Well, I've always bought mine from Kevin at Coastal DCC, and I must confess I've got a couple on order from him, and they are £59 each, I think. Hey, there we go. But £59, it's a fair amount of money. It's about the same amount of money as a decent 00 gauge coach now with lights. I mean, the money that's running away with our hobby is enormous. So when you consider this board controls so many signals and it's the same price as a coach, it's actually not that much expense. It's actually not that expensive in the first place, but there we are. Right, that's all wrapped up. Thanks for bearing with it. A little bit geeky, I know, but hopefully you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank the patrons as usual, because you guys make it all possible. Without your support, I couldn't do it. There's the old subscriber button. If you're not a subscriber, this should be ashamed of yourself. Right, and a video here and here. See you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.